Active immunity is just the process of this active immune, natural immunity. You've been exposed to the virus before, and now the next time you get exposed, your body will know how to fight it, or you can get vaccinations for it. So distemper, rabies, things like that, the things we give vaccines for, you would get this active immunity. So you can either get a modified live or a killed virus injected into you, and then that would help the body be able to fight it off if they get exposed to it again. And then mom can also help. So you can get passive immunity from your mom. So mom will give some antibodies in the placenta to the baby. And then after baby's born, in the milk, so in the colostrum. So this will give the baby some added protection from catching any viruses or disease. But as soon as mom takes those maternal antibodies away, the antibodies are going to disappear from the baby. So eventually they're going to need their own way of fighting things off. So that's why we recommend vaccines for them. So just know where you get it from, passive immunity. And if I'm going too fast, just say, slow down, lady. So just some things that can determine how likely you are to get sick. Like, were you exposed? Did you get an exposure to it? Did somebody cough on you and now you have the corona? What is the mode of infection and was it transmitted? So like all of our animals at school, when they get Giardia, it's fecal oral, so the mode of transmission would be them walking through the grass and then licking their paws and getting the infection again. Is it a really virulent strain? So how easy is it to catch this particular disease? And then, of course, your own immune system. Like, are you able to fight stuff off? And do you have resistance? So did you already get the vaccine? Or are you different species? So since we're humans, we can't get distemper, so we wouldn't get that. And then cats can't get it, but they would get other diseases. So species has, uh-oh, Chloe get kicked out. I didn't do it, I swear. There she is. Chloe's back. And then these two slides, there's several different kinds of hypersensitivity reactions, but for the test, I'm only going to need you to know about 4. The in-person test, I would have you write out the differences between the types, but because this is going to be a virtual test again, it's just going to be matching. So like type 1, the animal gets exposed to it. I like to use the example of peanuts. So if you have peanuts and you get a bad reaction, peanut allergy, what's happening is those antigens bind to IgE antibodies within your body. So the next time you get exposed to peanuts or peanut butter, or anything with peanuts in it, you're going to have a really severe angry reaction. It could be potentially fatal unless you have immediate medical intervention, which is why some people carry the EpiPens with them. So that's type 1. So your body just super overreacts the next time it comes into contact with whatever antigen it is. And then there's type 2. This happens when you have a major infection. Usually it's some sort of sepsis. And then what happens to the immune system there is it gets really confused. So it's creating these antibodies to fight off the disease, but instead of fighting the disease, it goes ahead and starts killing off your own body cells. So it gets a little mixed up. So that can happen in some patients as well. And then type 3 is a weird one. So you have the antibodies, you have the antigens, but what happens to them is they get trapped in little tiny blood vessels, little capillaries. So then once the whole complement cascade starts sending out those chemicals, it starts to damage that small tissue area that those antibodies and antigens are in. So I like to use the example of like a respiratory infection. So instead of it kind of going through all of the bigger blood vessels, it gets trapped inside these tiny little capillaries in your lung, and you could start to have blood clots and things like that. So that's a kind of a rare one. And then this last one is a cell mediated. So this one, the animal's body is just completely confused. So just know what SIRS stands for. It's systemic inflammatory response syndrome. So what happens with SIRS is the individual cells are having some sort of reaction within themselves, and they're seeing themselves as foreign invaders. So they start to destroy each other. So that's what SIRS is. They probably had some sort of inflammation or infection that led up to their immune system like kicking in, but then the cells just got real stupid, basically. So it starts fighting itself. So like diabetes can do that, and it'll start to kill off its own pancreas. And there's some of the dogs we talk about that have the demyelinating disease. That would be like a SIRS type of response. And I think that is our last slide. It is. It is our last slide. I know there's only 4 of them, but did you have any questions about those things?
Can you go back to the active immunity slide?
Sure.
I can't read.
No, that's fine.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that video first, and then end it with explaining how to do the lab for tomorrow. So let's pop this up here. Where is it? Oh, done. My computer is, I have so many screens open that it doesn't know what to do with its life. Let's see. Okay, where did Zoom go? Now I lost you guys. There it is. Okay. Make sure I'm sharing my sound. Okay.
At the final conflict, the Battle Royale. A fight to the, well, hopefully not death, but a big fight anyway. It only seems fitting that we spend this, our last episode of Anatomy and Physiology, talking about one of your body's last-ditch efforts to defend itself at all costs. This is what happens when all the other fail-safes have failed. Your skin and mucous membranes did what they could as physical barriers against infection, and your humoral immune response cranked out antibodies in an effort to keep your interstitial spaces healthy. But when those systems weren't enough, your cells themselves were breached, and pathogens and abnormalities began to run amok where antibodies could not get to them. Now it becomes the business of your cell-mediated or cellular immune response. And that's where stuff gets real, where cell fights cell, and where heroes look like T lymphocytes. These lymphocytes, known on the streets as T cells, go after body cells that have been hijacked by things like viruses or bacteria or become cancerous. T cells cause inflammation, activate macrophages, get other T cells fired up, and generally regulate much of the immune response. Which is important because of all the ways in this course that we have described how you could die, 2 that we have neglected to mention are what happens if your body completely fails to protect itself, and what happens if your immune system goes rogue and attacks your own healthy cells. But even when they're functioning well, some of your immune cells are careening around your body like miniature biological versions of Mad Max war boys, amped up on signaling chemicals, scouring the terrain for hostiles, and covered from top to bottom in the dismembered parts of the enemies that they have vanquished. They're out to protect all of the tissues and organ systems that we've been talking about for the past 46 weeks, and these guys play for keeps. If there are cells in your body that look and act like they're from some post-apocalyptic hellscape, it's gotta be the cells in your immune system. Aside from the fact that they go around literally eating their enemies and have names like natural killers, some of these cells are dressed for the part too. Specifically, they go around wearing parts of the organisms they've killed so others can see them. Sounds a little bit messed up, but we're talking life and death here. The stakes are high. And this kind of behavior occurs both in your innate immune response and your acquired response. We've already talked about how in the innate response, when a phagocyte sees a suspicious character, it engulfs it and kills it, right? But what we didn't get into before is that during its attack, the phagocyte actually breaks the pathogen into tons of tiny molecules and then proudly displays those broken bits in grooved proteins on its outer membrane. These proteins are called major histocompatibility complexes, or MHCs, and they're a lot like how Vlad the Impaler decorated his front yard with the bodies of his skewered enemies, or how a battle-crazed warrior might show off a necklace made of knuckle bones. Because cells from both your innate and adaptive branches do this grisly accessorizing like it's their job, they are referred to as professional antigen-presenting cells. Which might make you think, is there an amateur version of an antigen-presenting cell? And yeah, there kinda is. Every nucleated cell in your body, which means all of your cells except for red blood cells, have one kind of MHC protein on their surface called class 1 MHC. MHC1 proteins present short chains of amino acids that are based on endogenous proteins, that is, proteins synthesized inside that cell. So if a particular cell is healthy, the antigens on its MHC1 tell roving immune cells that everything is okay inside, nothing to see here. But if the cell is, say, cancerous and it's making abnormal proteins, then it'll fix bits of those proteins to its MHC, which alerts immune cells that there's a problem inside and basically asks to be killed. Now, your immune-related cells, like macrophages, dendritic cells, and B cells, wear class 2 MHC proteins on their outsides. These are the professionals. Class 2 MHC proteins bind to fragments of exogenous antigens, like a virus that's been engulfed, broken up, and displayed to get the attention of other cells. And this is how MHCs are totally essential to the cellular immune response. Because the heroes of your cellular defenses, the T cells, can't actually detect whole antigens. They can only recognize them when they're all diced up and decorating an antigen-presenting cell. T cells are made in the bone marrow, but they mature in the thymus, the lymphoid gland that sits on top of your heart, and which is actually what the T in T cell stands for. And you have several different kinds of T cells, but the two you really have to know about are helper Ts and cytotoxic cells. Helper Ts themselves can't kill, but they can activate cells that do, and they help call the shots for the whole adaptive immune response. Meanwhile, cytotoxic cells are the ones that actually do the killing of the cells gone bad. Now, much like how a naive B cell carries antibodies for one specific antigen, a naive helper T cell has receptors that will only bind to one specific combination of a class 2 MHC and a particular antigen. If that matches right, the helper T bonds to the MHC antigen bit and it gets activated. Then, just like with the B cells we talked about last time, the helper T starts copying itself like crazy, making a few memory T cells as well, which remember that particular antigen should it meet one again in the future. And it also produces a whole mess of effector T cells, mostly more helper Ts, but also some regulatory T cells that I will get to in a minute. But the main thing the helper T cells do is raise the alarm that tells other immune cells that there is a problem. And they do this by releasing a cocktail of chemical messengers called cytokines. When a cytokine enters another helper T, that cell usually starts dividing, making more memory T cells and more helper Ts, which release more cytokines that keep boosting the signal. And some of those cytokines also go on to help activate the cytotoxic T cells. You know that macrophages from the innate system just sort of roll up and swallow pathogens whole, but cytotoxic T cells do their killing a little differently. They roam the blood and lymph looking for hijacked amateur body cells that are asking to be killed. Basically, these infected cells are already dying, so they've digested some of their invaders' proteins and stuck them on some of their class 1 MHCs, effectively waving a surrender flag made of fragments of the very virus or cancer that is destroying them. If a cytotoxic T cell with the right receptor floats by, it binds to the antigen MHC combination and moves in for a mercy killing. It does this by releasing special enzymes that punch holes in the cell's membrane or otherwise trigger apoptosis, killing both the cell and whatever is inside of it. Then the cytotoxic cell just detaches and continues to run down other prey. So by now it should be pretty obvious that without T cells there basically is no adaptive immune response, and it really all comes back to the helper Ts, which is why immunodeficiencies can be so deadly. AIDS, for example, is caused by the human immunodeficiency virus that specifically attacks helper T cells, and without the helper Ts, there wouldn't be much of a humoral response either. Because the cytokines that come screaming out of the helpers not only activate other T cells, but they also finish the training of the B cells. The fact is, most of your so-called naive B cells don't get fully activated and become memory or effector cells when they first bind to an antigen. And there's a good reason for that. Since antibody receptors are generated randomly, you might wind up with B cells that could bind to your own healthy proteins, like, say, your growth hormone. So once a B cell interacts with a substance, whether it's growth hormone or some dangerous bacterium, it still needs to bind to it, engulf it, and present some fragments of it on its surface. But then it'll stop to await inspection. It pauses until the right helper T cell comes by to check out its presentation. If the T cell binds to the presented fragment, then it releases cytokines which fully activate the B cell, and suddenly you got antibodies going everywhere. But if it doesn't, then the B cell just goes about its business and doesn't trigger an immune response. This check and balance between B's and T's is an important safeguard against your immune system becoming too good at its job, which is a very real risk. A hyperactive immune system can cause mayhem by losing its ability to distinguish enemy from self as it turns on your own body. Your regulatory T cells, another type of effector, help prevent this by releasing inhibiting cytokines that tell other immune cells to stand down once the initial threat has been handled. Without that regulation, the body might start cranking out too many antibodies and cytotoxic cells that could damage or destroy its own tissues. This dangerous confusion is what causes many autoimmune diseases, like multiple sclerosis, which eats away at the myelin sheaths around neurons, or type 1 diabetes, which tears up the pancreatic cells that make insulin. So the takeaway here is that your immune system is usually really good at its job, which is to kill stuff in the name of keeping you alive. And you really don't want it to go rogue on you, because if there's one thing you should have learned in the past year with us, it's that your body is both resilient and fragile, and it survives only when the sum of its many complicated parts stays balanced and works together. And that is the glorious wonder of you. As we wrapped up our tour of the immune system today, you learned
The glorious wonder of you. All right, so I just wanted to go over the lab for tomorrow. So like if we were in person, I would be showing you this in person and doing a really good example of it. I did find another virtual blood smear for you guys. This one had a lot less lag to it that I found. So I put both of the links up there for you to try. But this one too, you got to zoom all the way into 100 there. And it just displays it real nice for you. So what we're going to be doing is our relative and absolute counts. So relative count just means you're counting 100 cells. So like here's one lymphocyte, and then all you're going to do is keep scrolling until you find another one. And you can either, here's another lymphocyte. Let's see if we can find another. Here's two segmented neutrophils. So you'll just keep scrolling and tagging the ones that you find until you get to 100 cells. The in-class one, let me show you, there's an app. So if, this does look better on a computer, so if you wanted to download this app, it is free. There's a white blood cell counter app, and it basically, I don't know if you can see, it has pictures and everything on there. The first one, you don't have to worry about the nucleated red blood cells, but it has all the other ones on there, and the ST stands for stab, which is also your band, another name for a band cell. So all you would do is, as you're counting these, like say, we'll say two segmented neutrophils, I would just go boom, boom, and put it on there. And this little thing at the top here, this little square, kind of, there's a little red square inside of it. It kind of just shows you where you are on the smear. So what I usually do is I do what's called a Battleman pattern, where I just go back and forth until I find 100 white blood cells. Everybody's going to have different numbers because you might start down here, somebody might start up, here. So everybody's going to have different numbers. I'm not worried about that. As long as you're counting 100, let me get to 100 on here and I'll show you what you do after that. Boop, boop, boop. Let me show you. Almost there. 75. I'm not going to count 100 of them and bore you to tears with that one. Okay. So when you get to 100, it's going to stop. And it's going to say, do you want to go to another screen or do you want to continue count? Just hit continue count so you can have those numbers for yourself. And then what you're going to do is I've made you guys, I haven't posted it yet because I want to do a little bit of editing to this. So this will be on Edmodo later. So you're going to take these numbers and you're going to stick them on this part. So that's your relative count. So my segmented neutrophils, I had 49. So the unit for that one is percent. So 49. Band neutrophils, these are just pretend numbers. Lymphocytes, 9%. Oh, what did I just do? 9%. And then monocytes, I had 9. Oh, how did I do that? EOs, 12%. And Bezos, 12. So one of the major errors that I see sometimes is these don't add up to 100. They have to add up to 100. I've had people count 52, 75, 112, like just like random numbers. This will be due tomorrow. So I'm going to release it in the morning and then I'm going to give you the class period to actually work on it. It shouldn't take you more than 30 minutes to get it done. So I figured just using class time. We'll just check in tomorrow though, because I'll release this tonight so you can check out some of these links. So if you're having any like major malfunctions, we'll check in, take attendance. If you're not having any issues, just go do the lab and turn it in so we can just get it done that day, same day. So that relative count, that's just your 100. Now to do the absolute count, that's over on this side. So for that one, you're going to need the blood work from the school. So let me show you something else. So if you were at school, you would be getting one of these sheets here. Let me zoom in for you. Zoom. And it would look like this. This is from our ProSite machine. And I usually on the sheet, I have you pick out certain things like hematocrits and make you copy it down just so you get kind of familiar with where everything is. But the only number that I care at all about is this one, white blood cell. The other big mistake people make is they use these numbers to do their math. I don't want you to do that. I only want you to use this white blood cell number. So what I've done for you to make it much easier, let me get rid of this, stop. So on your lab sheet, I've already given you numbers. So this one right here, 11.43. This is the number I care about. I just make you write these all in so you can get kind of familiar with like where they are on the sheet if you have to look at it. But the only number that we need for this absolute count is that 11.43. So to do this math, all you're gonna, oops, I don't want to do that. No. So I want to be able to write on here. So here I'm going to do the math for you on this one. So what you're going to do is you're going to take 49%, which is 0.49. So you have to move the decimal place. And you're going to multiply it by 11.43, which, calculator. 11.43 times 0.49. That gives me 5.6. So I'm going to put that over here. So 5.6. And the unit for this side is K/UL. So that's thousands per milliliter. So you would do the same thing for the next one. So 0.09, so 9% times 11.43. It gives me, and I'm going to round it to the nearest 100th. So 1.03 thousandths per microliter. And that's it. So I'm using that 11.43 the whole way down. The other big mistake that sometimes people make is they don't convert this to a decimal point. They'll just do 9 times 11.43, and then they have these completely out of whack numbers. So don't forget to move your decimal, and then you're only using that white blood cell count. So basically this is just telling me, and if I add these all up, technically it should come up with something close to 11.43 if we did the math. Let's see, so this would be 1.03. I'm just going to put these, let's add it up. 0.3 and then 0.12 times 1.37. So if I added those all up, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.4. So it's not going to be exactly 11.43 at the very top, but it should be relatively close. So you can kind of check your work that way. So if I would add up all of these, it's going to be really, really close. 3, 7. Let's just add it up and just see. 1.37 plus 1.03. Yep. Oh, it's perfect. 11.43. So technically, all of these should be almost the exact number as your white blood cell count, or really, 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 really close. Don't forget to put your units. I know I didn't put my units on these, but what I'm going to do is these are really brief. This is what you would get like if we were in class, because I would be there hanging over you to make sure everybody's got, you know, the gist of it and is doing the math correctly. I want to add a little bit more to this since we're doing this virtually and I can't be there to like breathe down your neck and make sure everything is going good. I'm going to add some more details to this before I even post it. I'm going to get this posted tonight though, so you can take a look at it and just make sure that these two links, this first link here, this is the newer one, and that one works really well. Some people had some issues with the one from the other day, but then others didn't, so I put 2 options. So any questions about that? It's pretty straightforward, and we will definitely do this lab when we get back. I know you're going to be probably pulling a lot of blood and stuff, so I'll probably just have you guys pull blood for our class, and then we will go ahead and do our labs, our real labs instead of the virtual labs. But let's meet up tomorrow. It is called white blood cell counter, or WBC counter. There's a few of them. The one I have is just called WBC counter, and it has pictures too. Oh, the other question I had was, what if you're looking at it? Let me stop the share. What if you're looking at it and you're not really sure what it is? Like, there was one that even I was looking at it going, oh, is that an eosinophil or is it a segmented neutrophil? Let me see if I can find it. Like, this guy is really big and he's a little confusing to me. So I'm like, is it a monocyte or is it a segmented neutrophil? If in doubt, just go with your gut. I feel like he's really big, so I would just go with a monocyte. It's not going to hurt anything by, you know, by being off by one. It's probably a segmented neutrophil, but he's so big that I would go with, personally, with something else. But yeah, let's see if there's another one. There was another one in here that was, I wasn't sure if it was an eosinophil because of how it's stained. And then there was one that looked like a mast cell. Oh, here. Well, that's a beautiful monocyte. It's beautiful. Look at all them platelets. I almost wonder if this is a horse. Call that rouleau. I think this is the guy that I was confused about because he looks kind of pink. But if in doubt, just go with your gut. Like that one, I would probably just mark it down as a segmented neutrophil. So don't stress too much about identification and getting it wrong. I have no way of knowing exactly where you were looking on here, so don't stress. All right. Any questions? Nah. All right. Well, I am going to let you go then. Let's meet up here tomorrow. I'll post this tonight. Check it out. It hopefully will be up there by 7 o'clock. I've got to clean up the mess over here that I made, and then I'm going to work on editing that, and then I'll get it posted for you guys. And then tomorrow, if you're having any major internet issues or anything going on, just let me know. So I'm not marking you as a 0 for not having it done by a certain time. So sound good? All right, guys. You have a good afternoon. Go enjoy this nice weather. It's beautiful. I'll see you tomorrow.